has had devastating consequences for lives and livelihoods around the world. Though we thought there were less carbon footprint during the movement control order, there was heightened carbon emission due to rapid economic activities as we evolved toward the endemic phase. Is there a place for green economy in a post-pandemic recovery? Governments are looking for effective measures for recovery. Yet, as economies pick up, emissions are beginning to rebound. Is time running out for us? Let's find out from our experts about green economic recovery. Hello and welcome. You are watching the economic impact of the pandemic. And on the show today, we have Mr. Kamarat Zaman, Puan Terima, and Mr. Jay Shankar. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So today we are discussing about the green economic recovery. Mr. J, can I ask you about the broad perspective about the Green Deal, which has been introduced by the EU on Green Deal. So what is your take on this, and how does this impact Malaysian economy?
EU has been very progressive in terms of adapting policies towards achievement of SDGs, and European Green Deal is one of the cornerstone policies for them. But what I think what is instructive in the reason of them doing that is above and beyond the positive impact that such a deal could bring to their people in terms of health and wellness, is the fact that, and environment as well, is the fact that there are other dimensions that EU is looking. This particular deal, for example, which essentially is to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by about 55% compared to their 1990 levels, is essentially to generate jobs, is to enhance competitiveness, is to basically reset the economy and grow it, right? And I think these basic elements are something sometimes overlooked by a lot of economies. Malaysia, however, has been equally progressive, has looked at the sustainability agenda and has taken many proactive actions. For example, if you look at last year's budget, right, as an example, you looked at many different, or rather 2021 budget, you look at many different aspects of it that promotes sustainability. We've introduced the My SDG Fund, for example, which brings about greater coordination between the public funds and private funds to push the sustainability agenda. You've got many incentives that have been announced. Even on a ground level, the federal government is allocating, I think, about 70 million ringgit to the states for the EFT, for the ecological transfer, fiscal transfer, in order to protect biodiversity and so on. So I think it's clear that many of these more developed economies or economies that are far-sighted are clearly understand the full ramifications of adhering to SDG goals doesn't merely lie on its potential impact on environment, while that is good and fantastic, but it also, I think, have a major impact on resetting and remodeling your economy and re-energizing the GDP and the external sector, the export sector, and so on and so forth. To follow the footstep of EU and Malaysia and the likes is for many of us to understand that this is an opportunity for us to grow the economy and along with protecting the environment.
Brilliant perspective. Thank you so much, Mr. J. And any input from you?
I think from the private perspective, I think it's an opportunity for us to tap business opportunities from the growth of green economy. Because when we talk about green economy, we're talking about new technologies, new areas for venture, which may become considered, which is non-core to our businesses. So in my opinion, for the private, it's something that we need to tap the opportunities and explore beyond our comfort zone.
And Terima, what is the urgency that we need to adapt this?
I think it's timely because we are already at the point where I always say that we are at the cliff where if we do not take this opportunity, we will not be able to get it again. And this is the most what I call it practicable time, because when you talk about the climate change, it is something that we have to act now.
Yes.
And we cannot be depending on the policies itself. We at a corporate perspective, we are the key actors and enablers. So we need to be able to play our role to catalyze the pace of the development of the green economy via the embracement of the new technologies and solutions.
Very well said. Climate change is something very pertinent. Yes. And moving on, I think we have to discuss about how the ASEAN regions are very vulnerable. So due to the coastline and urban water shortage issues, so this situation definitely escalated the vulnerability further. How can we reverse this crisis from worsening?
Well, I guess ultimately to echo Terima as well just now, it all boils down to innovations. While those problem statements exist, there are also windows of opportunities for innovators and business owners to come about and find ways to mitigate it. And it's not only for ASEAN, right? All over the world, you are finding and you're experiencing a huge amount of natural disasters, and the opportunities is for us to be able to innovate and find ways to manage it in a cost-effective way. And if you're able to do that, I think it will sort of kickstart that process where the businesses are then able to find opportunities for them to create, even in this case, in the case of Madrid, export opportunities. And things like floods and such natural disasters happen in Malaysia as well as in ASEAN countries. So we feel that with the right policies in place, it will encourage Malaysian companies to maybe expand and repurpose existing technologies or invest in R&Ds so that they are able to address these problems constructively.
If I may add to that, I think ASEAN is vulnerable, as what you mentioned, is simply because ASEAN are developing countries. And for developing countries, we are focusing very much in terms of compliance and regulatory when we talk about environmental. And when we talk about the climate adaptation, is very much not for ASEAN to speak about loud for this point of time. And this is why we are looking into why we are focused having all this kind of issues where we are not being able to address climate crisis from adaptation angle, but we are mitigating it. Because why mitigating is very regulated in most of the ASEAN countries. So I think we are there. We are doing the minimum, but of course the potential area for us to consider is climate adaptation.
Indeed, I agree with you, Puan. The other thing, in the perspective of government, the policy on climate change has been basically introduced since 2009, which is National Policy Climate Change policy that was introduced back in 2009. And then we are waiting for the actual act to be introduced soon by Kementerian Alam Sekitar dan Air, which is it was announced recently about the Climate Change Act to be introduced.
That's very interesting.
Yes, that perhaps will we can look at both perspectives in terms of mitigation and of course, as mentioned just now, mitigation is very straightforward. A lot of industry, a lot of companies are very much into without them realizing, in fact, already involved in climate action plan, talking about green technology projects that have been taken since the beginning of 2010, when government announced the National Green Technology Policy, of which that drive quite a number of projects that have been supported direct and indirectly by government and private sector.
You're watching the economic impact of the pandemic. We will be right back.
Why do we tell you stories?
Relevant,
New,
efficient,
accurate.
reliable. We bring you extraordinary stories from around the world, from politicians, bankers, and even your favorite celebrities. This and many more on RTM's English News.
Kesiapsiagaan kemungkinan banjir kilat. Berikut merupakan kawasan-kawasan yang berisiko banjir kilat. Amaran ini dikeluarkan untuk semua penduduk, terutamanya di kawasan yang berisiko dijangka banjir kilat. Diminta sentiasa berwaspada dan mematuhi arahan pihak berkuasa atau agensi-agensi pengurusan bencana banjir. Untuk maklumat lanjut, sila layari. Pesanan ini dibawakan kepada anda daripada RTM.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera dan salam perpaduan. Tahun 2023 yang bakal kita tumbuhi ini pastinya memberi harapan baharu kepada kita semua. Di pihak Kementerian Komunikasi dan Digital, kita akan teruskan usaha untuk merancangkan industri kreatif negara. Kementerian juga akan terus memberi fokus kepada perkhidmatan telekomunikasi seperti memperluaskan dan meningkatkan kualiti capaian internet serta akses 5G kepada rakyat. Justru, marilah kita semua bekerjasama dan berganding bahu dalam menghadapi apa jua cabaran yang bakal mendatang. Kukuhkanlah perpaduan sesama kita demi keharmonian Malaysia yang tercinta. Selamat Tahun Baru tahun 2023.
Ini Bob. Bob adalah seorang penyelam marin. Setiap hari, Bob mendapati semakin banyak plastik dihanyutkan ke dalam laut. Kesannya boleh mengakibatkan jumlah plastik melebihi daripada hidupan laut menjelang 2050 jika tindakan tidak diambil. Dianggarkan 50% plastik yang dihasilkan adalah plastik sekali guna dan 13 juta tan plastik dihanyutkan ke laut. Kerana sayangkan alam sekitar, Bob mengambil inisiatif membersihkan sisa plastik. Kita semua boleh memainkan peranan dalam menjaga alam sekitar. Hindari plastik sekali guna. Untuk maklumat lanjut, sila layari laman sesawang berikut.
Welcome back. You are watching the economic impact of the pandemic. So, Mr. Kamal Zaman, earlier we were discussing about the climate change, and we have this Climate Act which is coming soon, right? Could you please elaborate on that further?
Yes. Basically, since the introduction of the National Policy on Climate Change that was introduced back in 2009, the relevant ministries is now start looking into developing a specific act, which is Climate Change Act, which is now in discussion and expected to be presented to the Cabinet and Parliament for approval. And then year 2022 is actually the target year where this Climate Action Act expected to be introduced and approved by the Parliament. And then actually not much details can be said about what will be the direction, but of course based on the national policy climate change that was introduced, of course it will covers both the adaptation and mitigation. As we have actually earlier mentioned, on the mitigation part, we should not be facing difficulties to get the participation of private sector to venture into type of projects that go into mitigation. But the adaptation, of course, huge budget are expected from government to look into the angle of adaptation.
Right. And what does this mean to businesses? Like, do they have to integrate into their business?
As I mentioned earlier, the introduction of National Green Energy Policy that was introduced since 2009 have actually tried to encourage more green projects introduced into Malaysia. Then several other incentives have actually been introduced by government. For instance, like Green Technology Financing Scheme, a certain allocation given by government to actually fund it and guarantee projects that have been undertaken by private sector, but guaranteed by government. It is actually a very good incentive introduced by Malaysian government, and then it is being an envy by quite a number of countries when we talk about this scheme that we have actually supported by government. You just can imagine government guaranteeing the performance of loan by private sector. No, it's very some of the discussion that was done at the ASEAN level, talking about how we develop this policy that was introduced by MOF from the very beginning into 2009, and then the scheme start in 2010. And then so far, more than 400 over projects of green projects that were supported. Yeah, despite the number in terms of value is low, but that shows that the interest of the private sector in supporting the green technology projects in the country. Yeah, so far we have actually approved more than close to 6 billion, in fact, from the scheme. Value close to 10 billion in terms of green project. In terms of investment value. So that's basically that's how we can actually relate to this climate action, how this can actually would be taking as mitigation into the climate action policy.
Thank you, Mr. Kamal Zaman. I think we are moving in the right direction there.
Exactly.
We have these businesses, Mr. Kamal Zaman, where they can contribute to mitigate these issues. So what can they do in terms of sustainable practices through business?
To a certain extent, Security Commission, for instance, have actually taken a step to introduce ESG, environmental, social, and governance, being imposed on public listed companies. So this is actually one of the ways where private sector, the public listed company, can actually contribute towards the greenness of the country. And then, of course, a lot of the areas of ESG, talking about when we talk about environmental, it is not only looking at the impact of environmental, but also the contribution towards the growth of the economy and the social aspect of it when we talk about ESG. And at the same time, we are talking about it relates to what Malaysian government already have, which is government green procurement. It is being introduced under the Ministry of Finance, and then this is actually to encourage SCP, sustainable consumption and production. So government as the anchor in creating demand for green sectors, we can the target given by government, which is 20% of government procurement to go for green.
Okay.
Green product and services. That, in terms of value, if we look into 20% per annum of 300 over billion on average of USD value of government GDP, so it comes to more than 40 over billion in terms of value. Just imagine the demand created by government, and then immediately that will create the supply towards the private sector, because government have actually created this demand. So that will actually ensure continuity in terms of contribution towards the greener economy as a whole. Without this, of course, it's very tough to actually encourage private sector to simply go into green areas. Yes. So the way I look at it, government have actually taken a good step in introducing GGP, but of course, a long way to go, and then a lot more products need to be introduced as part of this selection under government procurement, so we can actually increase more value in terms of government procurement.
Great to know that we are moving toward the right direction.
I agree with Jamal, because the thing about green product and services, right? A lot of it are pioneering efforts. They are POCs. So you do need local players to basically take it up, and the biggest procurement is the government. So government and any domestic consumption would help for us to build a track record for these companies. So eventually, when Madrid brings these companies overseas, you have a track record. Yeah, that's one. Two, it allows them economy of scale, because it's a pioneering effort, right? This is something new. The cost is expensive, unfortunately, and that is a chicken egg situation, right? So the buyer, somebody who's sourcing will say, look, this is a bit too expensive, right? So somebody has to start somewhere, and once they are able to secure such procurement locally, domestically, it allows them the scale for them to drive down the cost and become globally competitive. So that is a big part of making a company globally competitive. So in the case of Madrid as well, in order to push for ESG compliance, if you're a services company, we offer up to 100,000 ringgit in terms of reimbursable grants for you to go and get yourself ESG compliance, because ultimately for us is that ESG compliance is the gateway for not only the domestic market but also the global market, and that facilitation is taking place.
Thank you, Mr. J. That was lovely. Okay, I think we are moving towards a very great trajectory moving forward from here. I think we'll discuss further after a short breather. In for a short breather on the economic impact of the pandemic.
Kerajaan Perpaduan adalah kerajaan yang mewakili semua kepentingan politik utama dalam negara dan memberaku isu-isu yang telah termeterai dalam perlembagaan negara. Dan juga memberi pertimbangan. Saya ingat kalau dalam perjanjian kesepahaman pertama kali dalam isu yang khusus mengambil kira semangat perjanjian Malaysia 1963 atau MA 63, dan juga beberapa pertimbangan khusus bagi pembangunan dan juga prinsip-prinsip dasar yang menyentuh Sabah dan Sarawak.
Dengan sistem aplikasi MES 999, bantuan kecemasan kini lebih mudah. SafeMe 999 Polis menghubungkan seluruh rakyat Malaysia kepada pihak polis. SafeMe 999 Deaf untuk golongan kurang upaya pendengaran dan pertuturan, dan SafeMe 999 Blind untuk golongan kurang upaya penglihatan. Muat turun secara percuma melalui telefon pintar anda. MES dan aplikasi 999 memudahkan panggilan kecemasan.
Sorry lambat. Tak apa. Kau on tak malam ni? Mestilah on.
Syah keluar dulu
Dah malam lah Syah. Orang perempuan tak elok keluar malam-malam macam ni.
Mak! Syah dah besar ke mak? Mana pandai lah Syah
Kalaulah Cha tak terlibat dengan dadah.
Dadah membunuh, jauhi dadah.
Kepelbagaian budaya, agama dan adat masyarakat. Hidup dalam suasana aman dan harmoni. Bagai pelangi mewarnai keindahan alam. Kepelbagaian budaya, identiti negara. Warna-warni budaya dihormati, persamaan diraih. Keamanan dan kemakmuran negara dinikmati.
Apa hal kita ni? Kejamaan biasa turun.
Syuk. Buatnya nanti dia record video kau marah-marah. Lepas tu dia viral kan. Lepas tu pula dia orang kata kau ni macam something jalanan. Macam mana?
Tak boleh, Baan. Orang macam ni kalau kita biarkan, menyusahkan orang lain ni.
Syuk, cuba kau bayangkan kalau kau kena tangkap nanti. Apa jadi dengan anak bini kau? Ada kau fikir?
Takutlah saya, Baan. Kesian tak ada siapa nak tolong anak bini saya kat rumah.
Syuk, biarkan. Tugas ni biarkan pihak berkuasa yang jalankan kerja dia orang. Tugas kita patuhi undang-undang jalan raya. Kita jangan ikut perangai macam dia.
Kalau Abang cakap macam tu, baiklah.
Sikap anda mengubah segalanya. Kawal emosi dan patuhi undang-undang jalan raya.
Langkah-langkah keselamatan di luar dan di dalam rumah ketika tanah runtuh. Sekiranya anda di luar rumah, jauhi laluan dan kawasan tanah runtuh. Lari ke arah tanah tinggi yang jauh dari bahaya. Jika ternampak aliran air, tanah, batu dan tumbuh-tumbuhan, segera berlindung di sebalik rimbunan pokok. Jika tiada pilihan, segera peluk tubuh anda membongkok seperti bola. Lindungi kepala, duduk dan bersedia menghadapi sebarang keadaan. Sekiranya anda di dalam rumah, duduk diam di dalam bangunan dan berlindung di bawah meja, kerusi atau perabot yang kukuh. Pesanan ini dibawakan kepada anda oleh RTM.
Welcome back. You are watching the economic impact of the pandemic. So, Mr. J, back to you. Can we know about this green economy? And we have been discussing a lot about this, but there's this thing called brown economy. So, what is the difference, and how can we educate public on this?
Well, the brown economy, simply said, I think in layman terms, is where we are at this point of time. Where we live in a very fossilized or rather fossil-based economy, a very carbon-based economy, which is not necessarily bad. It served its purpose and will continue to serve its purpose in the next many years to come, in fact. But however, there is a transition that's taking place today that is the whole world is sort of moving towards a green economy, where the underpinning is the SDG goals, the 17 SDG goals. We are looking at probably a kinder and gentler society, where they're looking at the environment, people, and all that, and trying to address that in a meaningful and commercially relevant manner. So the challenge, however, is to make a lot of the players in the industry to understand why this transformation is needed, and that is critical. Madrid, for example, in 2019, we initiated a program called Sustainability Action Values for Exporters, primarily for this, where we were engaging them and discussing them and telling them that there's a commercial intent here. Now, of course, the transition is good. There are altruistic reasons for it, and so on. But usually changes take place not from policymakers, unfortunately, but it's usually driven by business owners, they are driven by entrepreneurs, by innovators, and so on, right? So this is the ecosystem that we want to engage. And ultimately for us is that we are able to address this. It will bring about solutions that would address or accelerate the transformation. So simply say the 17 SDGs, from our perspective, they are not problem statements. The 17 SDGs these are solution opportunities where it will enable our business owners and innovators to come up with solutions to look into how to accelerate the transformation. So we are trying to facilitate, and I think a lot of policies have been put in place by the government to ensure that this change takes place in a sustainable manner.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think SDGs are very important. So how people can really learn about these SDGs and integrate that into their life?
Well, clearly it has to start on very ground level. For us, in the case of Madrid, we are looking at maybe at the very end of the spectrum. We're talking to the exporters and trying to initiate the action from that perspective. But for meaningful and sustainable change to take place, it clearly needs to be done on a more ground level with the students, with those who are can make a change because they don't understand they're making the change. Ultimately, I think it always boils down to the fact that it's not a cost, it's an investment. Today, the pushback is simply because a lot of people feel that, why do I this? I have already enough problems. We are amidst, a pandemic, we are going through a lot of issues. I can't afford this. And I think the way to look at it is not to say you can't afford it. It's not about survivability versus sustainability. It's in actual fact, it's survivability, or rather sustainability equates to survivability. And that's how we sort of, need to put the storyline across.
That was crystal clear. Thank you very much. And I think back to business, how businesses can actually ensure that this is really aligned with our national policies.
We need to educate whether it's public or whether it's industry. When we talk about green, what exactly what we mean as green? Because definition of green, a lot of NGOs, academia actually come up with various definition of green economy. But as far as MGTC is concerned, when we talk about green, it always relates to 5 main areas, which is the first one would be to minimize the degradation to environment. So it always relates to environment, to minimize the degradation to environment. The second one will be either it is low or zero greenhouse gas emission. So that will be the second criteria. So we need to educate the general public about these elements of green when we talk about green, because still a lot of the general public are not clear about when we talk about green, what exactly we mean as green. The third one will be the conserve the use of natural resources. This is one of the cutting trees, whatnot.
Very
conserve our natural resources. And the fourth one will be the safe for use and it's good for health. So that is another angle that we are looking at as part of the criteria under green. And the last one but not least, the fifth one will be promotes the use of RE, which is renewable energy. Malaysia, we have abundance of resources as far as RE is concerned. We're talking about solar, we're talking about biogas, we're talking about biomass, we're talking about our mini hydros, we're talking about the potential of ocean thermal, some of the new potential area that we could easily explore that have more than 25,000 gigawatt in terms of potentials to be explored, which is as a renewable energy resources for the government rather than to focus on our burning coal, burning gas. So this is some of the area that we can actually look at and explore for the country. Basically.
That's very interesting. Thanks for educating us on that.
I think for Malaysia, the latest policy that has been established, which is Rancangan Malaysia ke-12, which is RMK12, is the closest policy that we are referring to. Why? Because this is the most, I would say, the most clear policy that define and spell out what sustainability is all about. So in the RMK12, it is spelled that what the RMK12 is supposed to bring Malaysia to become a prosperous, inclusive and a sustainable country by 2030. And the themes and the game changers that has been spelled out in the RMK12 is very clear. And one of it that I can quote is one of the game changer is to promote a circular economy.
Yes.
And circular economy is something which is very important because when we talk about sustainability, it runs through the whole value chain of the industry.
Yeah.
So from the upstream to the downstream and the midstream as well. So for industries, whether in whatever industry that you are, you must be able to embrace the circular economy back into your processes.
Right.
Because when you talk about climate change, you're talking about the carbon emission.
Yeah.
And when we talk about carbon emission, it's not just operational carbon. It's also the carbon that is embodied in the raw material that we purchase.
Okay.
So we need to ensure that whatever we do, all the sustainability aspects of the strategy that we implement must be able to embrace throughout the value chain.
Because end of the day, they are
yes,
related.
correct. So in my opinion, that for industry, for us to be supporting the national policy for Malaysia to achieve the intended goal of the national commitment nationally commitment determined goal by 2030 is that we must play our role from the industry to achieve based on our enterprise level to contribute to the national goal.
Brilliant.
So that's why I am looking from enterprise perspective.
Thank you very much. That was really clear. Okay, I think we will discuss a little bit more about the strategies and way forward after a short break. We're going for a short break on the economic impact of the pandemic. We will catch you right back.
Salam sejahtera dan salam perpaduan. Saya mengambil kesempatan ini untuk mengucapkan selamat menyambut Tahun Baru 2023 kepada seluruh rakyat Malaysia walau di mana juga berada. Marilah bersama-sama kita melangkah dengan semangat dan tekad baru memperhebatkan semangat perpaduan dan kesatuan nasional. Saya menyeru agar kita semua terus membudayakan perpaduan dan kukuhkan keharmonian yang kita miliki ini. Selamat Tahun Baru 2023. Sekian, terima kasih.
Saya merasa sunyi dan perasaan sedih berpanjangan.
Saya sering menyalahkan diri dalam setiap permasalahan.
Saya kerap mempunyai pandangan negatif terhadap diri sendiri.
Awas! Itu tanda-tanda kemurungan. Jangan pandang remeh kerana masalah kesihatan mental di Malaysia dijangka menjadi masalah kesihatan kedua tertinggi selepas penyakit jantung. Jangan biar emosi mengawal diri anda.
Hai, saya Amir Daniel, pemenang pingat gangsa Sukan Commonwealth Birmingham. Ingin mengucapkan selamat tahun baru kepada semua warga Malaysia dan semoga sukan Malaysia menjadi lebih cemerlang pada tahun 2023.
Salah satu daripada perkara utama ialah untuk memastikan keselamatan dari segi cyber, keselamatan data, memastikan bahawa rakyat dapat menikmati perkhidmatan telekomunikasi yang lebih baik untuk menyelesaikan masalah-masalah ini, kerana saya lihat ini adalah isu-isu yang sangat dekat di hati rakyat, ya, masalah internet dan sebagainya. Jadi harapan saya bagi Kementerian Komunikasi dan Digital, kita dapat berusaha untuk mengangkat cerita dan naratif yang dapat menyatu padukan rakyat, kerana inilah satu-satunya negara kita mesti jaga dengan baik, dan Malaysia ini adalah Malaysia kita dan kita mesti sama-sama bersatu padu untuk membangunkan negara kita, insya-Allah.
Tumpuan kepada soal tata kelola, good governance dan memacu pertumbuhan ekonomi yang lebih meyakinkan. Yang disepakati bukan soal kedudukan atau habuan, tetapi prinsip dan dasar. yang tertera kepada soal apa yang disebut sebagai tata kelola yang baik atau good governance dan juga soal pemacuan pertumbuhan ekonomi yang segar dan meyakinkan. Subsidi itu tidak harus diberikan kepada syarikat-syarikat agregasi yang untungnya tinggi. Berdasarkan laporan Nakol semalam, kita memutuskan supaya cadangan awal untuk menaikkan tarif elektrik itu tidak diteruskan kerana ini akan membebankan rakyat. Untuk IKS atau SMEs tidak terlibat, untuk syarikat pertanian dan pengeluar makanan tidak juga dikenakan. Jadi dari segi rakyatnya tidak ada langsung cadangan kerajaan untuk menaikkan kadar tarif elektrik.
Welcome back. You are watching the economic impact of the pandemic. Mr. Comrade Zaman, to you.
Yeah.
As we were talking about the climate change, when we look at Southeast Asia alone, which needs an estimated USD 3.1 trillion annually from 2016 to 2030 for climate change. So why does this happen and how can we mitigate this?
It goes back to the earlier answer that I have given earlier, that we are waiting for this climate action policy, or rather climate action act, to be introduced by government that perhaps will have a clear direction in terms of government policy and also looking at what kind of area, which is the adaptation area, budget allocation to look into this matter.
Right. And just now you were discussing about the renewable energy. Could you please add on to that?
Well, a few years back, which is back in 2018, under the Ministry of Energy, Technology, MESTEC have actually announced the direction of government to actually achieve energy mix of 20% renewable energy mix to the total energy. That 20% supposed to be achieved by 2035. So we have quite a number of areas that we can actually explore. But the new area that I have mentioned is actually on ocean thermal, which have not really been explored. We have this potential at the coastal of Sabah and Sarawak. The potential is huge. A study has been made by Malaysian universities to study this potential, as I mentioned earlier. The potential is approximately about 25,000 gigawatt. Which is that easily can surpass the target that we have. Instead of we are focusing now like what we have now, which is focused on solar, which is that will involve use of land area, which we are trying to avoid. So we should also consider to explore other source of renewable energy as part of the energy mix.
Okay, that was very interesting. And to talk about this green economy further, how can this benefit people and the nation in the short and long term?
Well, in the short term for people, I mean, from our perspective, simply said, is job creation. And this is something is greatly underappreciated. Let's look from export perspective, for example. So if a small farmer today is exporting, say, chili, he's exporting and somewhere, say he does chili sauce and is exporting to China, and or US for that matter. And in the past, it had been price and it had been quality. These are the two variables that defines his product. But today, the green story comes into play, right? So somebody is going to ask him, do you have a green footprint here? So if he has it, Now, suddenly, he has this added competitive advantage. So, from that perspective alone, there's a window of opportunity for a lot of people today to step into that. The transformation is happening into a green economy, and those who move in early, be it in terms of having the right skill sets or having the right businesses, they are going to benefit tremendously. And I think it's also good that prior to that, the Malaysian government has pushed for digitalization in a big way. It fits very well into the green economy, because green economy it has a lot to do with data, right? And through the digitalization process, you have built a data architecture. You're putting a data infrastructure in as well. It allows for data traceability. It allows for data transparency, and so on and so forth. So the pieces are there. I think as a layman person, they need to see opportunity. So inevitably, green economy is going to create jobs. So we need to be ready, and we need to be excited over it. At least that would be the long term where we have. In the short term, as mentioned earlier, there's a lot of support given by the government in terms of incentive and so on, and upskilling opportunities are also being given. These are the opportunities out there for Malaysia.
Thank you. From the industry perspective, if I may add,
yes, please.
From our perspective, why this is very important for us as a business strategy is very much from market entry into new markets, as well as securing the market segmentation for us, as well as creating market demand, because our customers are demanding for greener solutions and technologies and products as well. So if we are not becoming a provider of the needs of the new customer behavior and demand, we'll be out of the market. So for us, from private, it's very much about these two factors.
Thank you very much.
The industry, as far as MGTC is concerned, there is basically, when we talk about green economy, there is basically 6 main sectors that we are focusing that relates to the industry players, which is, the first one is energy. The second one is waste. The third one is water. The fourth one is building, which you're talking about green building. The fifth one is actually transportation. And the fifth one is manufacturing. These are the focus, have been our focus since the beginning of 2010 until now. These are the main focus area that we are looking at when we talk about energy. This is divided into two. We're talking about renewable energy, we're talking about energy efficiency, so which means reduction into carbon emission. So GSG, coming back to SG. When we talk about CASA, our function always look at reduction in carbon emission, which is referring to GSG. I give you one simple example. Now, especially last year, in 2021 towards year end, announcement made on low carbon mobility blueprint. Which is one big area that we can look at. One of the sector that have actually contributed a lot of emission. We're talking about from the ICE, internal combustion engine. Now we are moving into energy efficient vehicle. We're talking about be it electric vehicle, be it hydrogen vehicles. So on average, as a layman term, on average, our normal cars, talking about we are driving 20 kilometer, one go and coming back 40 kilometer per day, on average. This contribute to approximately one particular vehicles contribute approximately 2 ton of GSG. So what exactly, when we refer 2 ton of emission, what exactly? You can actually relate to the hot air balloon. The size of one hot air balloon, approximately about 1 ton. Just imagine. We take example of there is approximately about 13 million of passenger cars registered in Malaysia. Just imagine 13 million times 2. You can imagine this hot air balloon covering our atmosphere. That's why we have this possible impact on climate change. So we government direction towards heading this, looking into transportation sector as one of the area to be looked at that will actually benefit not only this for benefit for our future generation, talking about climate policy basically.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your views. And talking about private sector's role, and how can private sector and government come together in this? Mr. J.
Well, I guess inevitably that has to take place. Currently, at this stage at least, is the government is taking the leadership. Right? And that is inevitable, right? Because it started off with the SDG, and on a national level, all the countries have agreed certain targets, and then it cascades down. It needs to go down to the industry level, And if you drill down, there are 17 SDGs and there are 169 targets, right? So there is a lot of details in that. Now the industry will then have to take ownership, right? And then from the industry onwards, then it cascades down to the company level, And then over time, it's the company and the industry will have to take the leadership with the support of the government. So clearly, both are partners in this, and they have to form a synergistic partnership to move forward, and they will do this ultimately if they can see, at least from a commercial point of view, if they can see them achieving the triple bottom line, that the people, the planet, and the profits. All these have to come in play. And the moment the companies, the business owners can see the triple bottom line as a reality and is achievable, and I think that will just, push the agenda forward in a very accelerated form.
That's great. But speaking of that, Mr. J, these SDG frameworks are pretty it's very high-end terms, right? So how can we make it simple for people to understand? And how can we make it accessible to people?
Simply said, I think it's about people and it's about planet.
Right.
Of course, it's also about peace and so on. But many of these, you got 17 SDGs.
Yes.
If you look at the first two SDGs, right, it's basically zero poverty, zero hunger.
Yes.
And I think these two is very relatable. Everything else, hopefully, will relate back to these first two.
Definitely.
So I think that's what they need to look at. We are heading towards a possibility of zero poverty and zero hunger through the green economy.
I think from my perspective, in order for us to make everyone understand what SDG is all about, it's very much simple. Because now when we talk about climate change, it's not about when we see the polar bear is losing the habitats in the Icelands, but it's coming very close to us now. We have the flash floods, we have the climate crisis, which is
already feeling them,
which is very local, and some of us are already facing it. So when we talk about climate change, it's not something that is not relevant to us. And we have to play our role to ensure that we, within our capacity, in whatever role we are now, we contribute towards making the impact lesser. So in my opinion, as what Mr. G has mentioned, is that when we talk about back to the context setting of our industries, we need to play our role to influence our business partners and our vendors to ensure that they are with us. Apart from partnering with the government, we need to collaborate with them to ensure that they are part of our journey, because we cannot be walking alone.
Definitely not.
From industry perspective, as what Mr. J has mentioned, there are a lot of targets that have been set at national level, which is spelled out in the nationally determined commitment. But industries must proactively syndicate with the government to ensure that whatever policy that has been politicized there are active discussions with the government to ensure that we are working as partners to create a high impact collaboration with the government, so that we have this active participation and collaboration discussion at the industries as well as the government level. This is very important.
Thanks for putting that in a nutshell. I think all of us have to come together to realize this vision.
I think ultimately is whatever we do, it has to benefit. Whatever we are doing now, we're benefiting the future generation. So we are all at a crossroad. We need to see this in that perspective. But having said that, the journey is not going to be a solitary journey. The government is hand-holding, is providing a lot of support. infrastructure, and it started some time back. I think that's the other thing. The green economy is not something that's happening today. Slowly has been transforming. Yeah, we had a lot of different policies in place. Right back then, we had the bioeconomy policy, the MSC status, and all that. These are all pieces of this puzzle, right? And today they're all coming together, and we're heading towards a particular place. So I think rather than getting alarmed, I think they should be motivated, they should be excited, and like what Puan Sarima was mentioning just now, it will help us mitigate a lot of issues that we have currently facing, natural disasters and a whole bunch of other things. But also from a commercial point of view, it's going to open up windows of opportunities. The older economy, you're going to lose jobs.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So you got to sort of repurpose yourself. You got to upskill yourself. But at the same time, the opportunities are going to open up. Right. So from business opportunities, job opportunities, it is going to open up. It is now. It's for us to empower ourselves. With the support of the government, for us to make sure that we are part of this global journey towards a better future.
I think it's also that we have to be mindful that it's not about somebody else, it's about our generation, and we have to be responsible for our future.
Yes,
thank you very much. I think with that we are done with our discussion. Thank you so much for all your brilliant input. You're watching the economic impact of the pandemic. Thank you for watching.